Hello everybody and welcome to my review of the 2014 film release Foxcatcher, directed by Bennett Miller and starring Steve Carell, Channing Tatum, and Mark Ruffalo. And I will give a brief plot description here. Basically, this film is about two brothers who are both successful Olympic wrestlers who join up with a very powerful sponsor, and how this partnership ends up turning out in ways that probably were not expected. Now, this is definitely a very dark, disturbing movie that I respect more than I really love or even like as a piece of filmmaking, and I will get into all that right now. First of all, let me just say this movie has a very unique mood. It's very creepy and low-key and disturbing, and the way music is used is very interesting in this film as well. There's not a lot of music, there's a lot of non-music scenes, but when it is used, I think it's used very effectively. The film just has an odd tone. I'm not sure I've ever seen a movie quite with this tone. You kind of just have to watch it to see what I mean. The acting is uniformly excellent by all three actors. Channing Tatum is very solid in his role. Mark Ruffalo, who was Oscar nominated, is solid as usual. And the real shock for me was Steve Carell, also Oscar nominated, and in my opinion, very deserving. Wow, was he. I mean, this guy was just mesmerizing to me. As a matter of fact, the times he was not in scenes in the film, I really thought the film lacked the power that it had with him in it, which is interesting because he's really not a very likable character in this film, but he's just so menacing, but in a very odd, unique kind of way, and I really thought Carell nailed this. All three actors are really good, though, in their roles. Now, this movie, like I said, is very low-key. It's got a very slow burn to it, which works very well, and it allows for the characters to develop, which I really appreciate. The flow of the film is very natural in that events just kind of play out naturally. That nothing is over dramatized. Everything just kind of happens like it would happen, like we're in, an everyday world, which I really appreciated, in a time when a lot of things to me are overdone in film. I think that is a big problem sometimes in modern cinema. So I appreciate that fact. Unfortunately, there are a few issues with this movie that drag it down for me somewhat. For one thing, I'm not a person that needs a lot of action in a film or a lot of things to happen right away. For a film to be interesting, if the characters are interesting and the film is slowly building, I think that's great. Unfortunately, in this movie, I do feel that there are times at the beginning and in the middle of the film that the film is just slow to be slow. Like the filmmaker saying, we have an interesting story, so let's just not do anything. And I can't even call it a slow burn because the tone and mood of this film is pretty much the same all the way through, which is another thing that gets just a little bit tiring after a while. The film does feel long. It's quite a bit over 2 hours, and it does feel like certain times that you just wanted things to pick up a little bit and to get moving. Like I said, if you're doing something with it, like a slow burn, that's okay, but because this film pretty much has the same mood all the way through, which is okay that it has that same mood because it's effective. But in that case, I think the film would have benefited from being, just a bit shorter in that regard, because there's only so much you can do with a slow, dreary mood before it really drains an audience member. And unfortunately, it did that for me. Another thing about this film, and this is a problem that I seem to be having a lot with movies lately, is that the pacing is odd in other ways, meaning that the film really starts out very slow, and then the ending almost feels a bit rushed. It's like, why didn't you balance out the pacing so that the beginning and the middle of the film could have moved a little quicker and you would have had more time for an end. It almost felt like they said, well, this film's running too long, so let's just hurry through the last 20 minutes, which also have kind of a confusing timeline. Like I said, the film goes at a slow pace, and then at the end of the film, everything just seems to happen really quickly in succession, which is a bit odd. But because the acting and characterizations are so good, it doesn't kill the movie. The movie's still worth seeing. I just think the pacing is a little odd. I'm not sure if that's a script or an editing issue or a little bit of both, but it just feels a bit strange. But overall, this is a memorable film. I think this is a film you remember after you see it. I've still been thinking about it. It's very thought-provoking and brings up a lot of issues, about competition and about not really knowing what's underneath a person. Two of the three main characters in this film really have problems. One has a hard time dealing with pressure and success. The other one seems to have had some problems all the way from childhood, and I like how those characters are explored, and I respect it because we don't get that all the time anymore. And to me, any film that is thought-provoking is definitely worth watching. The film is just very unique and memorable. It's hard to totally explain it, but it's just a movie I think you should see. Just be prepared for some very slow spots in there. But overall, I think this is definitely a movie worth watching despite its flaws, and I give Foxcatcher a 3.5 out of 5. And as always, thanks for your time.